Cinema. Hi everyone, my name's Anna Smith. I'm a film critic, broadcaster and host of the feminist podcast Girls on Film. So I'm absolutely thrilled to be here for this very special Q&A. Today I'm in conversation about Saint Maud with director Rose Glass and stars Morfydd Clark and Jennifer Ehle. Welcome to you all.
Hi.
Hi, welcome everyone. And welcome everyone watching at home. It's great to have you with us. If you're watching us live, we're taking your questions via comments on YouTube, Twitter and Facebook. Our Twitter handle is @Curzon Cinemas. Please use the hashtag Saint Maud and we'll read out as many as we can. Well, Rose, let's start with you. Congratulations on an incredible film. Your first feature, amazingly. And today is Saint Maud Day, the day people can finally see the film at home. How's that feel for you?
Finally.
Yes, hooray.
It's great. It's
Good.
really good. It's really exciting to get it out there, and it's having a sort of limited theatrical run in the States at the same time at the moment. So it's been nice to sort of start to get it out there a bit as well, and then they've got their Epix release on the 12th. So it has felt quite long.
Yes, long time coming, and well, congrats again.
It feels strange talking about it now because we finished it. We finished the film in sort of summer 2019, and I think I don't know about these guys, but for me anyway, it felt like a lot of the big exciting stuff kind of happened then. Just sort of finishing the film and doing festivals and then getting picked up by distributors. So it has been quite weird to then have quite so long since.
Well, if I can take you all back in time to before all the magic started to happen on screen. And I want to talk to both the actors that we have with us today, from both Morfydd and Jennifer. What excited you about the script? Let me start with Jennifer.
Well, I just loved the story. I loved the characters. It was, it was like reading the film. If you've seen the film, it was like reading the film on the page. It was wonderful.
It's a truly extraordinary film, and I can imagine how it's all there in the script. Morfydd, talk to me about how it was for you. Did you immediately feel you had to do this film?
Well, I would say the ending, even on paper, was very, very affecting.
And
I don't know how to not be.
If you could just move yourself around. There you go.
No.
Thank you.
Okay.
Perfect.
Also, I could see so clearly who Maud was just from reading it once, and that's kind of I rarely have that type of clarity in things. So that was wonderful. I was just immediately obsessed with Maud.
Rose, talk to me. I'm interested to know, because obviously you had a very clear script and very clear characters, but once the casting fell in place, did that start to inform any kind of slight shifts or fine tuning with the characters once you had these two fantastic actresses in place?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's totally particularly through the casting, but then continuously through the shooting of the film and the editing, things always keep changing quite a bit, which I really enjoyed about the process of making this. But the casting's obviously the sort of first big one where the film sort of starts to come to life a bit. And they both, I don't know, I think I thought before I cast it that I had a really clear picture in my head of what they'd both be like, and then inevitably end up sort of finally seeing real people doing it, and they're quite different, and sort of changed them in good ways. And the fact they both ended up being from sort of not England, so we've got more of it being Welsh and Jennifer being American, and then we ended up happening to sort of settle on Scarborough to film it in, and that hadn't originally been sort of exactly the location in the script, so it made them both outsiders, and elevated it all a lot.
I like that sense of them both being outsiders who are so distinctly different, but once they come together, there's a sort of strange connection.
Well, stuff like that, because there's the bit where she's sort of in the cafe when she just started working for Amanda, and the line where she's kind of asking God, why would someone like her be in a town like this? That, I think, I only wrote that after having cast the two of them, because it's sort of, now there was this question, how did she get there? And then actually I really like it as a line, because it says quite a lot about how she sees the world, the fact that she's aligning herself with Amanda and not the rest of the town. So that was kind of nice stuff that made it feel more real, but was a response to casting.
I'd like to talk to both your actors now about how you feel, what kind of headspace they're both in when they meet each other. Morfydd, talk to me about where she's at when she meets Amanda.
I feel that Maud kind of swings quite strongly between either feeling like inferior or superior, And I think at the time when she goes in to look after Amanda, she's kind of on quite a kind of superior feeling. Yeah, and I think Maud doesn't expect what's what's going to happen to her. I think she's very surprised by her divine calling. She's just kind of like, I'm going to do the job well. So that's what it is.
Yeah, exactly. She kind of settled well into her sort of new persona by then, is kind of like, I've got a job, I'm going to do it well. Yeah,
it's an interesting point to meet her, isn't it, when we're trying to sort of work out where she's come from, and obviously it's been a bit of a journey, and that she's like, this is her new mission. Jennifer, talk to me about what place Amanda's in when she meets.
Well, Amanda is, I think, she's bored, she's terrified, she's on a lot of various medications that are probably affecting her in all sorts of ways. I think she's very lonely, very isolated. She has very few intimates, and she's probably, was probably a bit of a, I mean, she can no longer create. I think she was a dancer. That was a huge source of her power and joy, I think, was her creating. And I imagine she was, sometimes toxic with the power, and but also probably created some beautiful, amazing things as well. And all that's been taken from her, and so she's scared and lonely and bored.
I must say, Rose, I was very impressed with this character of a dying woman that didn't follow any kind of cliches or template that I'd seen before at all. Can you talk to me a little bit about creating that, someone who really does have agency and in some ways still a glamorous life despite everything?
I think it was kind of being, when writing it anyway, it was kind of being aware of the element of cliche of some of the setup, I guess, of her as a character, and then trying to sort of subvert it. And again, that was a lot of things that sort of happened through the casting, because, I think the character of, woman who's kind of written, and like the character used to be quite a bit older as well in English, and it started to feel like, and some films I love have these amazing characters of kind of women who's sort of like hidden away from the world and are sort of, crumbling away in a loft, like we sort of mentioned, Miss Havisham in it quite openly. And the idea of Maud being this kind of sort of innocent young virginal sort of nurse / nun type who sort of goes to this haunted house on the hill and meets this sort of sinful older woman, that's I don't think that in itself is kind of fresh, like that's kind of quite tropey sort of setup, but it's sort of inspired by a lot of my very favorite films. And then I guess hopefully the idea is that both of them take in turns to be sort of the antagonist and protagonist, and yeah, like you said, and yeah, the fact when we cast Jennifer and the character became younger, then it sort of added this extra dimension to her of, like Jennifer was saying, just the sheer sort of frustration of her situation and the sense of things being kind of cut short when they shouldn't be. It's not like it's a sort of old woman who's kind of gracefully retiring and kind of vanishing and looking back on a long successful life. So that kind of immediately made her more interesting to me. Yeah. And neither one of them is a kind
she's
of
angry, right? She's. I don't think I said that as well, but
yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I think you did. It's pissed off and kind of looking for distraction, and then this kind of cute, weird nurse turns up who seems to have this weird fixation with her, and she's kind of flattered and goes along with it. Anyway, I'm rambling, but yeah, that was.
Thank you, Rose. Now we've had a question in from Patrick via YouTube. This is about a different section of the film. What was the significance of the last interaction between Maud and Joy?
Missed opportunities, I guess, sort of too little, too late. That scene we did sort of actually in the script and in the edit sort of went back and forth a couple of times on whether to have it before she'd gone and killed Amanda or afterwards. So initially when we shot it, it was going to come immediately, like the morning after she killed Amanda. So that's actually why in the background of that scene you can see her bedsheet kind of hanging from a washing line. It's because it had been covered in blood and she'd washed it and hung it out to dry. But then the edit, it worked a lot better going before, and a sense of tension. And yeah, I was really worried. I was saying to Mark, I was like, but there's the sheet in the background, it's not gonna work. He's like, no one will notice. And they don't, so that's good. But I don't know, for me, that character, like sort of in my head when I was writing it, a little bit of the inspiration from that was sort of from the character at the end of Brief Encounter, who kind of, sort of unwittingly in the cafe, sort of just as the lovers are like never going to see each other again, and kind of start sort of like babbling away, not realizing that she's sort of ruining this moment. Just a dose of sort of reality of someone who's just completely outside of this intense, strange world that the character's found herself in. So, and particularly with that character, but I guess any scenes where Maud's seen interacting with regular people or people outside of her and Amanda and God's situation, if it's just a sort of a check of kind of realizing how kind of far she's gone and is in kind of need of help.
We've got a question from Lewis about the character for Morfydd. This is via Twitter. And it says, Maud is such an intense, interesting and horrifying character. Were you a fan of horror before joining the cast of this film?
Yeah, I was a fan of horror, but I don't think I was like as deep into kind of the horror fandom as I am now. And I feel like the horror fandom is so open to kind of new things and stuff, but kind of this to be kind of mine and Rose's kind of first kind of really seen thing. It's a really kind of lovely genre to be part of. But yeah, I remember watching The Orphanage when I was kind of about 17 and being kind of enraged. It was the first type of horror I'd seen that wasn't just kind of very gory and terrifying, which I enjoy as well, but it was kind of one that I was like, I'm sad. So yeah, and I find watching, I have to build myself up to watch them, and then I get this like relief after watching them. I think lots of kind of anxious people get that. Yes, so it's a privilege to be in a horror.
Well, I'm curious to know about the influences in general, because Rose, I understand that you gave your cast a list of films to watch in preparation. Is that right?
Yes, I think so.
So what's on it? And would anyone like to explain that? So anything that anyone watched that they were particularly struck by?
I think I sort of, there were a few Bergman movies and Polanski movies, and
I watched the Cassavetes, the
Opening Night,
Opening Night,
and Woman Under the Influence. Oh, yes, those ones. I love those ones. And The Devils by Ken Russell, and The Servant, the old one, not the old film, not the TV series, and more of a thing. I said, yeah, you watched Ingrid Goes West for like a more kind of contemporary kind of idea. But
and Persona.
Persona, Through a Glass Darkly, The Silence. A lot of things are basically sort of, I don't know, it's a bit of a mix of genres, sort of not exclusively horror, but I think I just wanted these guys to sort of have a sense going into the shoot of the tone of the film.
Yeah. Because
sometimes all this references stuff, it feels a bit like, so it's a bit of this and a bit of that, which obviously isn't helpful, but I thought it would be good for these guys to get a sense of the fact that, the films that I was inspired by whilst writing it were generally quite, heightened and quite stylized, and they could sort of, I don't know, that's the world that we were going to be in.
Well, Ingrid Goes West is an interesting one, because that's obviously a very contemporary film which talks a lot about social media. I mean, Morfydd, talk to me a bit about that in terms of, do you feel like Maud is very actually disconnected from the world and her contemporaries in that respect?
Yeah, I think she is really is very disconnected from kind of like, and we see that her phone very simple and kind of not a smartphone, but I do feel that she has the kind of, I think this striving that you have to be better that we have on social media, I kind of really recognized in her, and the way she's kind of gone to that is through kind of being pure and saintly. But I think there is like a huge pressure on kind of like millennials, kind of people Maud's age, of like, what's the point of your existence? Because kind of the world around us isn't that easy to fit into, and kind of the normal journeys that we've made, that our parents made, aren't there. And so I kind of feel, that lots of what she was going through, I recognise very much as being very modern, but she's kind of subverted it to be going through it in a very particular way.
Channeling it in a different way, I guess, but maybe tapping into stuff that we all kind of do.
Well, we've got a question from Strong Hillbury via Facebook. It says, firstly, let me thank you for all your great work in what was my favourite film of 2020. How hard was it to get finance for such a challenging film, and one that had such interesting ideas at its core?
Our producers aren't here. It's more of a question for them. So I think I'm luckily just kind of the wafty creative who's like, oh, this now, that now. To be honest, I think for a first feature, we were quite lucky. I think generally in the you know, we took it to Film 4 first, and they liked it and sort of put us in development straight away. So then they were sort of paying me to work on the script, and was doing that for a couple of years. And then BFI came on board as well to co-finance and for the end of development. And it was okay. I think probably because it's, you know, comparatively, you know, it's a pretty low budget film. So I think probably the smaller the film is seen by the financiers in scale, in a way, the more freedom you have to kind of do what you want. So I felt really lucky that all of those guys and you know, producers and all that look generally very supportive and nice. So I feel it's all surprising. I make it sound like it was all like really smooth now. It's like it was all stressful and hard work and stuff. But yes.
It seems like you also had an incredible team, Rose. I mean, everyone's at the top of their game here in terms of heads of department. I mean, the costumes, the cinematography, it's just fantastic.
To be honest with you, like from the beginning of the whole process, like I found the writing sort of very stressful, because I think you're by yourself the whole time, obviously, and we're not greenlit, so you're sort of like, am I spending all this time on this thing that's never going to get made? That was bad. But from the point where we were actually casting and greenlit, and then you actually have a team of people working together, it's just sound like I'm gushing, but it's a really wonderful group of people, and we all I think had a really enjoyable, fun shoot and post, and for quite a few of it was a nice mixture of some of the team being really experienced, but then, like, you know, it's my first film, more of his first lead, like our composer, the DOP, one of our producers, it's all their first films. So it was this cool atmosphere of it being an equally big deal for a lot of people working on it, which was lovely. So yeah, it continues.
It's extraordinarily assured. It's amazing to believe that it's so many people's first feature. But let me move to Morfydd now, because I understand that this wasn't without incidents, even on your first day. Did you have a little bit of an accident at some point?
Right, yeah. Fell down the stairs.
Oh.
And I've never, the expressions when I open my eyes to, like, particularly me kind of splayed at the bottom of the stairs.
One of the runners kind of like ran in, because I wasn't there, and then somebody ran into the room where I was, and they're like, Morfydd's fallen down the stairs. So, oh God, first day, and she's had some terrible, like, it's fine. I soldiered on.
And that is now immortalised in Maud.
You're never going to be let to forget that, are you? Sorry about that. Jennifer, tell me about, were there any challenges for you? I mean, there are some very strong scenes, as anyone who's watched this will know, but any particular challenging moments for you, or moments that days you'll never forget?
No, it was all really great. The bald cap was, I think it took about 3 hours from beginning to end. We only had to do it, I think, just for 2 days of shooting, right? The bath, and then,
well, I think it's a couple more. I'm sure you had it on at least a couple more times than that.
I had it on a couple more times than that.
As few as possible. Yeah.
Yes, but it was, and you know, Jack, who did it, is incredible. But it was, you know, I've always read about when actors have to do prosthetics or latex and stuff, and they say, oh, I was in the chair for 6 hours or something. You think, God, how could that possibly be? But it was 3 hours to do just that little bit of head. But it was, but that was, you know,
it works really great. The technique was apparently, because Jakarta, our makeup artist, she collaborated with another woman, Jane Mayer, I think her second name is, terrible if that's wrong, to specifically come in and help with the bald stuff. And I can't remember the details of it, but apparently the technique they were using, I think, is different to sort of whatever the industry standard is for doing the bald head, and it was kind of like some sort of cheaper, innovative thing that she'd come up with. But I think, yeah, they hadn't tried it that many times, and it then did it on Jennifer, and it was like, oh, this is brilliant.
It was really amazing. If you saw it before, because she put all the little bits of kind of fried frazzle hair kind of on to make it, but when it was completely smooth, like
that's great.
Plucked head, it was really extraordinary looking, like an egg, and it was really amazing.
The day before, well, maybe a couple of days before we started shooting, once Jennifer had arrived in town, we were able to do like a few hours one afternoon of camera tests. So, you know, the sets weren't quite finished, and these guys were sort of in like half finished costume and makeup, but it was just, you know, to get a sense of how like everything was working together on screen. But yeah, Jennifer was in the middle of having her bald head done, and it was at the smooth, perfect bald egg stage. So, and then we sort of like brought you down into the house for the first time and filmed a couple of shots of just these two together by a bedside. And Jennifer's wearing like this sort of like beautiful, like stiff white kimono that we didn't use in the film, and this perfectly smooth bald head, and looked like a sort of beautiful alien or something. And more of it just sat on the bed, and then just sort of like, we've just got lots of weird shots of you in sort of not quite finished costumes, just sort of like holding each other's faces and stuff. It's nice.
We've got a question from Carlos via YouTube. What was the most haunting element of the film while filming? And also in retrospect after filming, when you saw it for the first time? Question for anyone who wants to answer that.
Here, I have a picture. Can you see my head there?
Oh.
There's the bald head. Can you see
it
that?
looks like it's been, like it just sort of been cut out on there. It's good.
Oh.
No, it's good, it's good. And it looks like you've been sort of photoshopped just around here.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? It's amazing.
You can tell it was a very haunting experience shooting this film. I think we spent most of the shoot just kind of being like, oh, great, having a nice time. I don't know about you guys. I mean, genuinely filming it. I mean, you know, you're always so up against time. It's just sort of a bit of a mad rush getting everything done. A lot of the sort of creative conversations happened before. I think. I mean, probably the most stressful bit was filming the ending. The original way that we filmed the ending, we did actually film a stunt with a stunt woman setting herself on fire, and that was at the very end of the initial shoot in just a few days before Christmas in 2018. And so we'd done everything. So we were with Morfydd on the beach, and we were filming the finale. And initially we did try and do it with a real stunt woman, and that was just, and the stunt was fine. We ended up having to. It was really wide, and it sort of didn't work quite how I thought it would in the edit. So we ended up going for the big close-up, which is more of it against green screen. But yes, that was quite stressful, and it's really exciting because you're like, oh, because suddenly you have, you know, the sort of stunt team guys kind of take over a little bit to sort of do all the checks and stuff. And just before you go to it, you suddenly see this woman, you know, just being wrapped up in and being smeared in all this flammable liquid, and there's all these extras standing around, and you're suddenly like, oh God. Like something's, and you know, it's dangerous, and so that was stressful maybe, but she was fine, so I wasn't haunting in a bad way.
That's good to know. I think what it is that everyone's watched it has obviously found it incredibly impactful and haunting, so it's kind of curious to know how people feel on set. But would either of the other two like to comment on that? Like, the question was, what's the most haunting element during filming, and maybe perhaps more relevantly, when you watched it back, was there anything that really struck you? Yeah.
Well, I think because we did it kind of chronologically, by the time kind of it got to the real kind of terrible points of the film, we really knew these characters and we wanted it to be different for them. And I think, Jennifer, that scene, like Maud and Amanda's like final scene, I remember finding that very taxing because it was just terribly sad. And I think also, like, I think Lily Knight's character of Joy is so brilliant. Like when she comes to check on Maud in the flat, and can't quite see how bad things is, and I think she like shows like how that story is going to stay, that you know that everything that happens that day is going to be with Joy forever, because she didn't do quite enough, even though she really tried. Yeah, so those two scenes for me kind of, yeah.
I enjoyed those, and I think those two ones we had sort of best part of a day to do each of them, which was great. So we all just got to kind of like run it quite a lot of times. Yeah, they were brilliant.
I made a little boy cry because I had everything on. It was at the end, and I had the blood and the bald and the blood and the kimono, and I was coming down from up where our kind of dressing rooms and makeup and everything were. We're up at the top of this house, and then it had this fire escape that went down sort of, I don't know, 3 floors outside the house, down onto the street in Highgate, and I was coming down to go next door to have lunch where our catering was set up. And there was a little boy who was about 3 or 4, and he saw me. His mother didn't see me yet, and he saw me and he just burst into tears and then hid his face in his.
Which I was delighted about. I was delighted about this when I heard it. Like, brilliant.
Yeah, Rose was thrilled.
Great feedback for Rose. Yeah, poor child. Bless. We have a question from Ahmad via YouTube. This is to Morfydd and Jennifer. What were your first thoughts on reading the script? I feel like we may have touched on that, but feel free to elaborate a bit further.
What was sorry, say it again?
Their first thoughts on reading the script.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's for your lovely actors.
I knew I'd want to see it. I'd like to be in it. But I also knew that if I hadn't been asked to be in it, that it was exactly what I would like to see. And in fact, some dates, my husband still, so we're like, what are we going to watch tonight? My husband say, oh, I wish we could watch St. Maud. Because it's the film that, you kind of have to invent if it didn't exist.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rose, for inventing it.
Yeah, I felt that loads of stuff in it that I kind of felt was so urgent to talk about. And so it kind of, yeah. And it's amazing to read something written by someone who can write wonderfully with things that you care about in. And so it was kind of very cathartic to read it. I was like, it's beautiful.
Well, it is a film that stands up to repeated viewing, and every time I watch it, I get something new from it. And I feel like I've got 500 more questions for you all, but unfortunately we have to wrap up. But I want to thank Studio Canal for making tonight's event possible. And most of all, of course, thank you to our guests, Rose Glass, Morfydd Clark and Jennifer Ehle. St. Maud is available now to stream on Curzon Home Cinema. If you enjoyed the film and this event, please tell your friends. I've been your host tonight, Anna Smith. Thank you all and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.